Hello and welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm your storyteller and host, Dan Winella. Today's story, which is the next in the series of Growing Elder, about Winella trying to gather pieces necessary to create a wand powerful enough to rival Jack Frost's wand Everest, was originally told to my children in May of 2008. The original had a couple problems with it, and so I'm retelling it for you today. I hope you enjoy the story. Winella bowed politely before King Oberon and Queen Titania. She tried not to ever look too directly at them. They were so fiercely beautiful. King Oberon, with his skin the color of oak bark at midnight, and his eyes the shade of the most beautiful yellow leaf of autumn, and Queen Titania, with her skin the color of ash heartwood at noon, and her eyes the green of the first leaf of summer. It was almost painful to look at their beauty. But for all that, they were very friendly, even after Winella's supposed failure in her guardianship of the seed. They had always been very friendly to her and welcomed her to the fairy palace. Winella suspected that they knew more about the fate of the seed than they admitted. "Your Majesties," she said, "I have found myself on another quest in an attempt to be helpful to those who need my help, and I find myself in search of a rainbow in a bottle. Can you help me?" King Oberon frowned slightly. "Well," he said, "once such a thing would have been fairly easy. Leprechauns are the fairies you seek, but since Jack Frost has been expanding his dominion over ever larger parts of our domain, those green hills are now frozen solid and all the leprechauns have gone, searching for warmer homes in your world." "Well, dear," said Titania, "that's not true. There's always—" King Oberon said no, she would not help her. Titania shrugged. "She might. It would not hurt to ask." "Who?" said Winella. "If there's a chance, let me try." King Oberon sighed. "There is one leprechaun left, an exceedingly stubborn one, so stubborn that she sticks around in the middle of Jack Frost's frozen wasteland." "I like stubborn," said Winella. "Sometimes I've been accused of being stubborn." "Humph," said King Oberon. He looked over at Titania, and she looked back at him, and then they both smiled slightly, as though something unspoken had passed between them. "Well, dear," said Titania, "if you're going to go, Oberon here will point you in the right direction. And I have a bit of advice for you. You're going to be traveling through cold lands, so you should take a little something to warm you up. What's that drink you humans make?" "Oh," said Winella, "hot chocolate?" "That's the one," said Titania. "Maybe you should bring a couple mugs of it." "All right," said Winella. "And," said Titania, tossing her perfect hair back, "perhaps you ought to look into a bottle of conditioner." Winella paused for a moment, confused. Was Titania insulting her hair? But then Titania smiled, just slightly, and Winella knew that the fairy was up to something. "Yes, your Majesties," she said. "Thank you." She took the map from Oberon and headed off. And that was how Winella found herself standing at the edge of the portion of fairyland now ruled by Jack Frost. It was not hard to sort out where it began. The verdant green grass of fairyland gave way abruptly to a line of snow, a line that Oberon and Titania had said was creeping outward just slowly every year. Winella took a deep breath, zipped up the winter coat she had retrieved for home, patted the mugs of hot chocolate in her coat pockets, and stepped forward, her boots crunching in the snow. She kept her eyes and ears open. She did not want to run into Jack Frost on this little errand. The last thing she needed was for the Frost Fairy to begin to suspect that she was undertaking the creation of a wand that could banish him from fairyland once and for all, and return it to the control of its residents. And so she made her way quietly through the hills, following Oberon's map, which sometimes was a little difficult given that landmarks were covered in drifts of snow. Once or twice as she walked, she heard strange sounds coming from the heavy winter clouds above her, sort of a scratching, scraping kind of sound. But each time she held very still until it had faded off into the distance. Finally, she had crested a low hill and looked down into a valley that seemed strangely preserved from Jack Frost's winter wonderland. In the center of the valley was a pot filled to the brim with gold, and around it a circle of green, lush with four-leaf clovers. Seated next to the pot of gold was a very unusual fairy indeed, dressed all in green. The fairy had long, tangled locks of red hair, and an equally luxurious but much tangled red beard. Winella slipped and slid her way down the hill. As she approached, she realized that the fairy seemed to be sniffing and wiping tears from her eyes as she worked at an obstinate tangle in her hair with a hairbrush. "Hello," said Winella. The fairy looked up. "Oh, dear," she said. "I did not see you come." "Well," said Winella, "I'm Winella, and Oberon and Queen Titania said that I might find Caoimhe here. Is that you?" "Aye," said the leprechaun. "I'm Caoimhe, the last of the leprechauns, and not for much longer, I think. It will be time soon to be packing up my pot of gold and be on my way to the mortal world, where perhaps I'll be able to find a bit of rain and a warmer day, so that my hair will behave as it ought." "Oh," said Winella. "Well, I've come to see you because I'm working on a task, and for it I need a rainbow in a bottle." "Oh, wait," said Caoimhe. "You're Winella. You're that mortal girl Jack Frost is always on about. I have enough trouble with him as it is. You should be on your way. I have no desire to draw his attention." "Look," said Winella, "I don't want to bring you trouble, but this is really very important." "And what is it, then, that's so important?" said Caoimhe. I can't tell you," said Winella. "Well, then," said Caoimhe, "perhaps you'd best be on your way." Winella sighed as the leprechaun took up a new tangle from her red beard and began working on it with her brush. "Can I help you with that?" asked Winella. "No," said Caoimhe. "As I said, you should be on your way, and there's no help for my hair, but a bit of warmer, wetter weather." "Oh," said Winella. "Wait." Suddenly what Queen Titania had said to her clicked. She patted the pockets of her coat until she found it. "Here," she said. Caoimhe looked at her. "What is that?" "This," said Winella, "is hair conditioner. If you use it in your hair, it should fix your problem." "That's very kind of you," said Caoimhe. "Yes," said Winella, "so think about it, will you? Can I come back and ask you again, perhaps, in a bit?" "Well," said Caoimhe, "I'd be happy to try the little bottle of yours, but even if I wanted to help you less, I couldn't." "Why?" said Winella. Caoimhe gestured at the snow all around and falling from the clouds above. "In order to have a rainbow, we'd have to have some rain, wouldn't we? And all we have here, for many years now, is just snow." "Ah," said Winella. "Yes. Well, perhaps I could ask King Oberon or Queen Titania to help, maybe just warm things up just enough to have some rain?" "Oh, lassie," said Caoimhe, "if they could have done that, they would have done it by now." "All right," said Winella. "Well, why don't you go ahead and try the conditioner? I'm going to think about this, and I'll be back, okay?" "As you wish," said Caoimhe. Winella turned, feeling crestfallen, and started making her way back through the snow. She was about halfway back to the border of Jack Frost's lands when she heard that sound coming from above her. Again, she stopped moving, but this time the sound circled, and then she saw a ramp of ice descend out of the clouds, and down it, wearing ice skates and using Everest to create the ramp in front of him, was Jack Frost. He slid to a halt in front of her. "What are you doing here?" said Jack Frost. "Exploring," said Winella. King Oberon and Queen Titania have made me a welcome guest in Fairyland. Yeah, you don't see them around here, do you? Said Jack Frost. So get out. He waved Everest under her nose, and she could feel the cold radiating off it. No, said Jack Frost, you're always poking your nose where it doesn't belong. You weren't friends with Flibbertigibbet and that purple wish dragon. Well, things might be different, huh? Winella, trying to keep her hands from shaking, reached into her pocket and pulled out her mug of hot chocolate. I like having friends, she said. You should try it. You might be happier. I have friends, said Jack Frost. I have Snowy, my pet snowball, and I have all my minions. That's not the same, said Winella. She flipped the lid off the hot chocolate and took a slurp. She felt the warmth spreading down her throat and into her stomach. Jack Frost's eyes widened and he took a step back. What are you doing? He said. I was cold, and so I took a little sip of hot chocolate. Would you like some? She said, holding it out towards him. He took 2 steps back. No, he said. Get it out of here. I don't allow that kind of stuff in my lands. I'm keeping an eye on you. I'm going to check to see where you've been. And he turned and skated back up the ramp into the clouds. She heard the sound of his ice skates disappearing into the distance. She took another big sip of her hot chocolate, and then she looked down at her feet. All around her, the snow had melted, and she could see the green grass of Fairyland underneath it. Oh, she thought, that's it. She turned and started making her way back to Caoimhe and her pot of gold. When she reached Caoimhe's valley, she saw Jack Frost just turning and skating back up his ramp into the clouds, saying, I'm watching you, Caoimhe. Winella headed down the hill, listening to the sound of Jack Frost's ice skates circling in the clouds above. Hey, Caoimhe, said Winella. Oh, Winella, said Caoimhe, I have not had a chance to try your conditioner yet, and I don't think I'll be able to help you. Winella paused for a moment, and then she said, I understand, Caoimhe. It's just, there was something else I forgot to give you. And she reached into her jacket pocket and took out the other mug of hot chocolate. Try this, she said. I think it might help you feel better. What is it? Said Caoimhe. It's a human magic, said Winella. It's called hot chocolate. Oh, said Caoimhe. I think you'll like it, said Winella. Tell you what, I'll stop back tomorrow and see, okay? Oh, said Caoimhe, I don't think that would be a good idea. Winella said, it'll just be a quick visit, and then you'll never see me again, I promise. All right, said Caoimhe. Winella handed her the mug of hot chocolate with a wink, and then she turned and headed home. She spent a long and somewhat sleepless night, waking up several times wondering whether her ruse had worked, whether Caoimhe had tried the hot chocolate and the conditioner, whether they would be enough. And so, when the first orange of the sunrise began to shade the horizon, Winella was already up and on the Cat's Paw Highway, headed back to Fairyland. This time, listening carefully as she crossed Jack Frost's lands, she could hear the quiet scratch of ice skates in the clouds above her. When she reached the hills around Caoimhe's valley, a faint smile crossed her lips. The hills all around were green, and when Winella reached the top and looked down into the valley, she could see that the grass was damp, not with snow, but with the gentle mist of rain. She headed down. Caoimhe, she called. The leprechaun straightened up. Winella gasped. Her hair was gorgeous. Red, it fell in perfect curls down her shoulders and down her front and back to her waist. Winella said, It's good to see you again. I just wanted to check in. Caoimhe smiled and then said, Oh, Winella, I told you not to come back. I'm afraid I can't help you. You really must leave, and never bother me again. And I want nothing to do with your human magics. Here, take these with you." And Caoimhe tossed the bottle of hair conditioner and the empty mug of hot chocolate to her. "But," said Winella. "No buts," said Caoimhe. "You should go now." And then the fairy winked at her. Winella bent down and picked up the empty mug of hot chocolate and the bottle of conditioner. "All right," she said. "Well, thanks anyway." She headed back home, listening to the sound of ice skates follow her until she reached the end of the snowy lands. But it was not until she was back in her very own room, sitting at her very own desk, that she carefully unscrewed the bottle of conditioner and watched the light of the rainbow shoot out of it to her ceiling. She screwed the top back on. "Clever leprechaun," she murmured. "One step closer." And that is the end. Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but questions and witty commentary were supplied by my children. The music was created by Brandon Thompson. Your reviews and personal recommendations are the main way that new listeners find the show, so thank you for spreading the word. I'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to get in touch via email or social media, which are listed in the show notes. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.